developing an algorithm which matches people with psychotherapists' thoughts wanted. So, the idea came to me a few days ago. I am a psychotherapist myself in the process of building a private practice. I know that both as a practitioner and a client of mental health services there is no such system that accurately matches an individual with a specific type of therapist. Sure, there are very rudimentary system matching systems, but they only go as far as asking the person what their presenting issue is, for example depression, anxiety, relationships etc., and then typically a drop-down menu asking what type of therapy they want to receive, which most people have no idea what the various types are and if they're suited to their needs. So basically it's a personality inventory of sorts, a brief one at that, where the user answers a short series of questions and responds to the selections offered, and at the end the algorithm spits out therapists well suited to their style. There is a lot of research suggesting importance beyond all else in terms of client or therapist fitment when determining positive therapeutic outcomes. What I mean by this is that there are literally hundreds of psychotherapeutic modalities orientations out there, running from holistic approaches, to more cognitive and or behavioral methodologies and beyond. What I propose is a system that is user-prompted and takes person variables, for example, asks them in very simple layfolk terms what type of learner they are they creative or more hands-on with things etc., known as person variables. Basically it would be a bit of a personality inventory that would match up with a specific style of therapy and offer suggestions of therapists in their area which would be best suited to them. I figure it may be of use to EAPS employment assistance programs too, in terms of finding cost-effective ways of matching clients up with therapists to save costs. Lots of dollar and time is wasted in people grouping up with therapists that have a style ill-suited to their unique needs. I figure a system that can at least help get them within the ballpark would be of some value to society. I often get people asking me what would be the best therapist to see for their specific problem, and it's a tough question to answer without knowing a bit about them first. Thoughts on this? Definitely interesting. If this system existed, what would a doctor have to do to get their information accurately into the system? Can you elaborate more on the questions you would ask the patient? What are the potential criticisms from people in the industry of the impersonal nature of a computer matching people to doctors? Your code base could be one of the more sophisticated dating systems that are available. That would get you about 2 or 3 RDS of the way to the output you desire. You would need custom coding on top of that, plus a validated question set with extensive branching. There are lots of this process that are really difficult. As you have stated, the number of permutations that you have is going to make testing and tuning extremely difficult, and there would be no upfront way to detect a failure. You are not going to have enough traffic for a recommendation engine. As a domain expert, hasn't he already jumped a lot of those hurdles? And to your point about datasets, can't existing research be used as a starter training set? I could see that. I know at least one person who has had tremendous difficulty finding a therapist. I think you need 2 layers for this, one that would match the person's problem to therapy type, and a second layer that would then match that person's preferences with a list of therapists. This is pretty much it. You can make a simple 5-question type algorithm, seen in some dating sites, something simple. Anything that is truly in-depth and is more complexity than basic matching, well, it would be a long haul, but certainly not impossible. I would look into the mathematics or logic of how AI works just to prep you for what obstacles to expect and how they can be approached. It would be similar challenges in launching a working algorithm as you described. LOL reminded me of this. I think it's a great idea, and I think over the next 10 to 20 years many industries will change to do things like this. Most industries are very illogical. Problem W or health, here's a random doctor. Problem W or fitness, here's a random trainer, etc. The people who win at changing these industries will be adding a crazy amount of value, and many will get filthy rich in return. Hi JB 5150, welcome to the forum. I've been in private practice for many years and use a few online directories which work well for me. I think a good question to ask is, what would you be offering to the therapist that would make them pay you to advertise on your site? The main thing I look for in deciding whether to list with a directory is whether it comes up at or near the top of a search. And then on the directory itself, am I buried on page 37 or do I come up near the top when people are searching there? From that point, it's about the quality of my copy, but people have to be able to find it within 1 or 2 clicks. The best directories, IMO, are those offering additional content or services to both patients and therapists, i.e., write an article for us and we'll put you at the top of the search page. People are interested first and foremost in whether I have experience, training and skill with their particular problem. But I agree with you the research about other factors. Even within the same modalities or learning styles, there's much nuance and variation. Often it's the subtle, intangible things like body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions that are the make or break factors. As with dating sites, algorithms can get you in the ballpark, but you don't really know what it's going to feel like to be with a person until you're actually sitting there with them. I agree with health status testing and the many variables that would go into capturing some of this. I wonder if there are other ways to capture some of this that aren't based on an algorithm. For example, a deal where therapist gets a discount on advertising in exchange for a free or low-cost consultation with the patient. No. If he has hundreds of modalities, he has to create a question set that will intelligently slot a person into one of those 100. The simple math on that makes you have at least 25 to 30 questions with 5 possible responses to each question, just to get to a minimal 100 plus types of therapists. Then you have to have a testing system that makes sure all are achievable, and this is just the surface. No. Netflix provided 1 million records for their experiment to create a better recommendation engine, and that wasn't close to enough data to do the comparatively simple matching of a movie to a person's likes. Exactly. What about providing educational content about the modalities themselves? Or, limit the number of modalities a therapist can list? I went on to Psychology Today's directory and there are several therapists there, just in my zip code alone, who are listing 20 plus different specialties and about a dozen modalities they work in. This is BS. And patients probably know it. Simply putting in filters that require therapists to be clearer and more accurate about what they're actually offering could be an improvement over other directories. I am wondering if it can be linked to one of the many pre-existing free databases, such as basically the simplicity of this matchmaking site is to match a client with the modality or theoretical approach most appropriate to their learning style or way of viewing the world. For example, let's say somebody is having codependency issues, they're engaging in a lot of protest behavior, checking in with their partner 5x or day, in a chronic state of hypervigilance to any sign their partner may be withdrawing from them, etc. They go into said site where they'll initially be asked, what is your presenting issue? Standard fare for some therapist directory sites, whereupon they can select from a drop-down menu depression, anxiety, trauma, etc. etc. It's intended to be vague at this point of early entry. Next, the person will be asked questions regarding the type of issue, in layperson terms. The criterion will categorize them into a typology such as the person having issues of attachment, behind the scenes. After a few more simple questions, the algorithm may then determine the best fit therapy-wise is EFT, emotionally focused therapy, and provide of them a list of EFT professionals in their area. So yes, It will require some research on my part to determine which issues are best suited to particular forms of therapy. Criticisms: none. J or K stereotyping clusters of behavior and essentially labeling the person and fixing them to a particular type of therapy. Although the system certainly doesn't diagnose people assuming a particular type of person is best suited for a specific form of therapy when they may benefit from a form of therapy that is completely different to how they function or see the world. I don't think there really is much of a concern regarding impersonalization, as the idea is to save both the consumer and therapist time by finding a good fit, or at least increasing the probability of finding a good fit within a particular therapeutic orientation and type of therapist. I see it as a win or wine in this aspect because finding a good therapist is much like finding a good pair of jeans. You have to often try on a lot of pairs and it's hit or miss, often a stab in the dark till you find the right one. This, in my opinion, helps remove some of that guesswork, although nothing of course is ever foolproof. E-apps may like this too, as it can help improve efficiency of therapy. That's exactly what came to my mind last night. I would provide a concise, easy to understand detail on the therapeutic modalities best suited to the specific person. This may also force some therapist, over time, to have a niche. I know the counseling field is inundated with generalists, and most therapists in private practice do not thrive by presenting themselves as Jacks or Janes of all trades. So in a sense I'd weed out the generalists, and focus mainly on those with specific niches, or those with very specific orientations or approaches. If a therapist has advertised that he treats depression, anxiety, sex issues, codependency, PTSD, childhood trauma, etc., and the rest of the smorgasbord of issues out there, I am not wanting to see him or her. If your knee is bothering you, do you go to the local GP, or a knee specialist, assuming you're paying for either? I've yet to see a comprehensive person-to-therapist matching directory. Often I am asked by people what is the best therapist for their particular issue, and I don't have the time to sit and interview them and then go through a Rolodex of practitioners in my mind to provide them an honest answer. Instead I can direct them to my site, and it takes out all the guesswork for them. Also, the fact they're guiding themselves through the directory by answering some simple questions, they have a sense of ownership over the process of finding a therapist who is a good fit. There are hundreds of modalities, as I'd stated previously, but to be more precise, maybe only few dozen that are mainstream, that is listed on most directories. You can whittle that number down even more to a small handful if we're talking about employment assistance programs who only consider a few orientations as being empirically validated and very short-term forms of therapy, 5 sessions max, and therefore cost-effective. That's what I had in mind. Taking an algorithm that already exists and tweaking it, though no small feat in itself. Prior to getting my graduate degree in counseling psych, I spent years in IT, and have a coding background too. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for me to come up with something interesting on the later part, definitely worthy of consideration. TNX. Honestly, I am not quite sure, as I don't think I can just create and sell it off lol. I like the idea of advertising and offering the therapist some sort of incentive beyond getting them clients that are going to take best to their approach. Think of it in another way, the therapist's success rate will be higher and they'll have more disciples out there promoting their service through word of mouth. I think this can help control for that. Let's say you're a mindfulness-based therapist who uses meditation as the cornerstone of your therapeutic intervention. You're far less likely to come up in a sea of other therapists once the search reveals the person is best suited to your approach. Yes, you're kinda at the mercy of the algorithm itself. But rather than competing to be on the first few pages with a whole load of other therapists from every other intervention out there, instead you're on page 1 with 5 other mindfulness-based therapists within the client's area. For sure. Keep in mind this is only to get them in the ballpark. They still should go in for a consult and shop around. This is just a way to narrow down choices. Think of it like this. Let's say I want to buy a tapered button-up shirt, but beyond that I don't know what I want until I find it, sort of thing. I can spend my entire day driving around haphazardly going from mall to mall looking for this unicorn of a shirt, or I can go to the shirt matching directory and it prompts me through providing images and descriptions of my ideal shirt. At this point I now know I want it to be black, with dark buttons, to have a tall collar, be part rayon and part cotton so it can breathe, etc. etc. I am then present with 3 stores, 2 of which are in my general vicinity and have the shirt that is exactly what I want. Now I know, the site helped me narrow down my selection. Maybe a bit of a crude analogy, but you get the idea. Some awesome input, guys. Really stimulating some thought for me. Thank you all for the interest. I think of it as more of an intelligent filtering system. Think about your movie's analogy this way: premise, a certain type of movie will help me achieve a goal. Filter 1 choices, comedy, drama, action, thriller. Filter 2 choices, biography, history, politics. Filter 3 choices, investing, business, trading. Sure, there are 100 paths through that matrix, but all you're doing is elimination subsets at each step. Of the final list there are probably 2 obvious suitors, and 2 obvious duds. At this point the patient can make an informed decision, though, without just stabbing in the dark. I like it. No, because the user probably doesn't even know themselves what they need. You have to do some in-depth profiling. You might have to ask the same question 3 to 4 different ways. If you have ever taken a personality profile test, you will have seen this. You also have people that may be hesitant or even resistant to answering, or others that want to answer the way they think sounds better, even though it is not their situation. That's the beauty of it. It's not about asking what they need, rather extrapolating from data they provide what would be the best fit therapist-wise. It takes out all the guesswork and leaves the decision-making process to the algorithm itself. Self-awareness can be minimal in such a system from the user end. If it's made clear that the system is about finding a good match, there's far less chance of response bias, seeing as the sole intent is to help the user find a therapist for their own ends. So after a bit of research I came upon an interesting site that pretty much implemented my idea. That said, the so-called measure this guy is using is a 17-item survey forced choice questionnaire whereupon, depending on how the prospective client responds, will then match you to a therapist who took the very same questionnaire to determine a match. I mean, really, I could develop my own proprietary test as they have and ask questions such as what's better, vanilla or chocolate ice cream? And so long as the person and therapist match up on this and other items, it'll recommend them as a match. To me it's predicated on a very shaky premise. There's no scientific validity to this, other than anecdote. I've determined he has roughly 160 or so therapists signed up to be in his directory. The pricing scheme is as follows: 24 months for $16.67 per month, 33% savings; 18 months for $22.22 per month, 10% savings; 12 months for $24.75 per month. So he's probably generating a meek $2,700 a month as a conservative estimate, assuming people are buying into the 24 months plan. The site does not do search for Canada either. I like the outlay of the site, but I think there are some things I can potentially do a lot better, so I am not convinced I should outright scuttle the idea altogether. Edit. They've also created a match site for coaches as well, which seems to have a decent amount of signees. The survey is more or less the same as that on the therapist site with additional questions added. Please anyone feel free to chime in, I could use some insights. Don't scuttle the idea, keep at it. Sounds like a valuable proposition so far. Quality of data, quantity of data. As you have indicated in previous and the original post, You need to pre-qualify or highly qualify the psychotherapists to come up with adequate patient match. Look into deep learning algorithms that could leverage your concept with existing tech. Hey, I appreciate the support, fellow tailwinder. I feel more invigorated these past few days to get this thing going. I see a lot of deficiencies in what this guy is offering on his site. Won't get into all of them ATM. In a way it's helpful seeing how he implemented it, as it gives me some ideas about the aesthetics, look and feel of how I want the site to appear. I think he's not fully tapping into the revenue streams such a system has to offer, but I'm okay with that at this point. I don't want to develop a psychometric tool, as he has, seeing I'd sooner go with something that's been around for a while and has stood up in the face of rigorous research. With my programming expertise and clinical experience as a therapist, it shouldn't take me long at all to get something like this off the ground. That said, I want it to be done right and be very intuitive for the people using the site. The customers are therapists, so I want to offer a lot of value to entice them to use my service. You could also post in the internet or mobile apps or software section. Will do. Thanks for the tip. On a separate note, I am a bit weary using a personality matching test client, too. Therapist as a therapist may be reluctant to have that sort of info revealed to the client. For example, if there's a fit in personality from the survey, a client say who rated high in neuroticism may not want an equally neurotic therapist. Lol. From that standpoint, I can kind of understand why the guy on the aforementioned matching site used a non-standardized test to do his matchups. I actually had an idea similar to this not too long ago, jotted some thoughts down on it. Maybe it will help you out. I don't know your actual business model. I'm assuming from what I've read it comprises of a test that could link you to a therapist that would be the best match for you in your local area. I think it's a great idea, but the real question is how many psychotherapists could I or others find locally that would have already adopted your test in order for me to find them using your system? So something I'd like to ask you is, how do you feel about teeth therapy? What if you took your test, found a group of psychotherapists around the world that each can serve an individual personality type, and have the user be able to link up to said psychotherapist through an online video chat service, Skype or FaceTime or etc. In essence, you are creating a that would allow a user to connect to a psychotherapist, but not just any psychotherapist, a psychotherapist specifically tailored to the user through your algorithm. But I'm not sure if you would want to go that route, so just take everything I've said with a grain of salt and some consideration. So one way to do it would be to have therapists pay a subscription fee to be listed in my directory. Take the personality inventory survey. People who then use the site to find a therapist match will take the same survey. They will then be matched to therapist based on therapists who scored similarly. That's essentially what the guy did for. My initial plan was to actually provide only the person searching the directory the personality test, and then match them up with a specific therapist approach. The problem with that is a lot of therapists these days describe their approach as integrative. Also, finding research on the predominant modalities or therapeutic approaches and which clients personality-wise benefit most from them may not be even possible. So for example, for SHTS and giggles, let's say I find research stating that people who are abstract thinkers work best with a Gestalt therapist in treating depression. I don't think I'll find research for each mainstream modality and the best fit client for each. That, however, was my original idea. Good question. Obviously it did take some time for the system to mature. If you look at and his other site, he has around 300 or so therapists subscribed to his service. Outside of the state of California, however, there are very few therapists listed. Not sure what, if anything, he's done to try and exploit those potential markets. If there's a more attractive buy-in for therapists, I think I can address the problem of having a sparsely populated directory. Again, I am ambivalent about the personality inventory survey, as some therapists may fear their prospective clients will know too much about them, if after all we're using the test results as the matching variable. Interesting idea. So you mean ask therapists what type of clients they want and then based on a person's survey results match them up? I like the idea of linking to online therapy. It broadens the scope of things. I'd have to think about that one. It seems a bit lofty having to go around and contact random therapists asking what type of personality types they are looking for. Some wouldn't even know if you'd asked the question. Does anyone know what are the rules about using psychometric tests or patents for a business such as mine? The test I want to use was presented in a peer-reviewed paper, and is based on a bigger, more mainstream test that is in fact patented. You can only use test and question sets that have been put in the public domain. Peer review is not that. If they have gone to the trouble to patent a test, they will definitely want to get paid or require some sort of permission, and they must prosecute violators to maintain the integrity of the patent. The US government websites are the main source of these public domain algorithms, as they are federally funded, and that is almost always a condition of getting funded. So peer-reviewed implies whatever tool was created, even if based on another tool, implies patent protection? All I can find is that the test in question was proposed by 2 researchers. That other professionals in the community have looked at the question set, responses and grading algorithm and have offered no substantial rebuttal to the methods used. It has nothing to do with the patent. There are peer-reviewed public domain algorithms, and there are patented peer-reviewed algorithms. I understand peer-reviewed. I misunderstood what you'd said, as it also implies the tool or test is protected somehow. Short of contacting the researchers, is there any way to determine if the test is patented? No. And it does not have to be patented. Some will be covered by copyright law. Only if the owner explicitly places it in the public domain or certain amounts of time pass, does an algorithm become public domain. I've decided to just create my own survey, but based on the best scales from a variety of pre-existing surveys, so it has at least some validity. You have obviously looked into recommendation engines, right? No. What is that? Well, if you've used Amazon as a consumer, you have probably encountered the UI part, recommends items based on past purchases, viewed pages, etc. Look it up. Sounds like you are developing something around that or based on one. Something I came across for my own R&D. You might be able to gain some insight from the article. That won't work in this case. A. You need millions upon millions of reps for a recommendation engine to work well. B. You can't measure the outcome in this case. In new Amazon example, you get shown 3 add this to your cart items at checkout. If one gets purchased, then its score gets incremented, and then it gets shown more and more as people check out with specific items, from specific areas and things Amazon knows about the individual. The outcome the op wants is that people get the right therapist, not just slam a patient and therapist together and see how it goes. Sorry, but this is a really bad use case for recommendation engines. Just let the therapists take N1, IQ test 2, EC test 3, Myers-Briggs or Enneagram test. Then let the potential clients decide seriously. This whole idea seems a little micromanaged though. Do some sketchy test, and then find the right client or therapist. If you turn this around, and let's say it was another industry, like banking, instead of going to the best financial institute or hedge fund by word of mouth or results, you would do some test, and then invest part of your savings in this hedge fund or whatever depending on their answers. It kind of don't work like this. All we want is results. So, if you just have to go with this type of industry, do a ratings sites for therapists. But I bet that is not the type of thing you want to deal with. Bunch of negativity and stuff. But it's the reality we face today. Not all therapists are a great fit for their chosen profession. Hope this wasn't too harsh, and can get you thinking about the downside a little. A question you should ask yourself is if you think therapists put as much heart into what clients they get as you want them to. The reason for that guy having therapists, when the questions aren't the best, is the exact same reason they will sign up for it. I'm pretty certain most therapists doesn't want to share too much about themselves, like IQ score and all that stuff I came up with in my previous post. And that's the problem. The question too is, do they put as much heart into this as you want them when they pick clients? Or is it more about running a business and getting any clients to make money? I can't answer that, but you probably can, because I know next to nothing about the therapy field. The upside for the subscribed therapist is to have clients best suited to their persona. When I imply matching personas, I'm not saying at all to match an extroverted client with an extrovert therapist. Rather, a client who self-rates as being low in motivation, to be paired with a more extroverted therapist, for example. So the matching would be based on what's prevailing in the research on that particular variable I am matching for. So my survey, like that on my therapist match, will cover domains such as motivation, perception, learning style, etc. Another selling point is to offer therapists the ability to pay extra to have higher visibility advertisements on the site, beyond them being listed in the directory. I was also toying with the idea of integrated a Yelp-like rating system, though of course that may not bode well with some therapists, with the tendency of people with negative experiences to be most vocal. But certainly some therapists use a medley of approaches and are just hungry for clients. Any clients. This is just the beginning, so I am definitely interested in brainstorming on create some more carrots or incentives to encourage therapists to sign up. Another important side of this, of course, is what carrots am I offering the people who actually use the site to find mental health practitioners? If I can attract them, the therapist subscribers, I believe, will follow. Maybe offering them the results of their test to give them some self-insight. Now, on the other hand, just because someone is using the site doesn't mean they're following through and contacting therapists they'd found there.